everyone, and welcome to FECast, the first and only Eternal podcast where both of the hosts are qualified for Worlds. Congratulations to Stormblessed, my co-host, for qualifying. This must feel great, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I now have double digits day twos, and I'm qualified for Worlds, and that's really exciting because I never actually expected I'd get there. I wanted to get there obviously, and I tried my best, but it's hard, and there's a lot of chances, and you have to spike tournaments, so it's not like you're not guaranteed by any stretch, no matter how good you are. So getting there is really really nice.
Yeah, does it feel like there's a weight lifted off of your shoulders, maybe?
Yeah, and then I mean, I don't have to worry about this last chance tournament. I'm still gonna try building some good decks for my teammates, obviously, because I, just want to build fun decks. Expect to see some volatility out of me on ladder, obviously. I know it's Sunny's favorite card. Uh, but yeah, so I'm excited for Worlds. It's in 1 month away, right?
Yeah, it's just a month and like maybe 2 weeks or something.
It's also cool because TBC is now the team leading in number of Worlds competitors. We have 3 Worlds competitors, 2 Rank Star, and I think CSB both have 2 members each on Worlds.
I guess so. I haven't been keeping track of that. So, for anyone who missed it, this past weekend, Stormblessed played in the finals or the top 8 of the draft tournament, the draft championship, which we finally got last weekend, a month after all the preliminary rounds. And Stormblessed won the one match that he needed to, and now he's qualified for Worlds. And if you're wondering who I am and you don't know already, my name's Sunyveil. I am also qualified for Worlds, although it's been a while for me. I've been having a very long case of senioritis here, more or less.
Yeah, so the draft top 8 was very fun. It was, I drafted my deck like a month ago. I drafted over a month ago, and I've just been like, I was like, man, I really like my deck, but I always say can't share it off. The one thing that's kind of funny is, and I still stand by all of my statements, but like, the one thing I've been saying is like, the one thing I don't want to be in set 9 draft is or set 9.5 draft, I guess, is I don't want to be fire and I don't want to be shadow. And I definitely don't want to be Stonescar. Like, that was the one thing I 100% did not want to draft in any of my top 64 drafts. So obviously, my top 8 draft was the greatest Stonescar deck in the format that I've ever possibly seen. Basically, I somewhat can attribute that to Shab reminding me I don't remember when the article came out, but reminding me that yeah, you should draft the hard way because you'll get a better deck. So obviously, I had some luck. I first picked the Wretched Rats, and I second picked the Murky Tentaclesis, and Shadow was just open after that. But I found the open line in Fire, and I was rewarded by getting Senway, Smuggler, Cremate, and other Shadow Rares packs 2 and 3. Even though I think those factions are generally awful and have not great cards, if you can get the hookup with either a couple uncommons or in this case, a number of great rares, you can draft a good deck, right? You have to draft the hard way. But if you don't want to draft the hard way, just avoid Shadow and Fire if you can.
Yeah, I mean, all those cards that you named are very good, even if, generally speaking, Fire decks and Shadow decks don't do so well. I've had enough success with the Shadow, like, Xenon decks have been doing really well for me, but certainly Fire is a faction that I, kind of wanted to stay away from in that format. Anyway, so what's going on in the world of Eternal? Well, as Stormblessed alluded to, we have the last chance qualifier that's going to be at the very end of the month after the Eternal celebration. What's going on then? I'm not entirely sure. We haven't heard too much, but will be happening around October 31st, whenever that weekend is. And then Worlds is going to be happening for the lucky few people who are going to be participating in it. And that's going to be November 14th, right? That's the first day of it, and then it'll be spilling out until the next weekend.
Yeah, November 14th and then November 20th and 21st, I believe, are the dates.
Yeah, and yesterday there was news that there was going to be a balance patch, and that patch happened today, I believe. I don't know the timeline. It's happened very recently. Anyway, so we're going to be running that down. There are a lot of reverted nerfs, cards that have been nerfed in the past and are having that change reverted and going back to their former glory, and a few small things that I think will help the metagame in general. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's jump right into it, shall we?
Yeah, so starting things off, we have a number of changes to the Stonescar deck. And in fact, we have I think the first, is this the first ever reverted buff in Eternal history? Reverted buff and nerf and buff. We have Argent for Instigator, who was originally a 3/3 that cost 2 shadow, and then became, I think, a 3/3 that cost 2 and a shadow, and then became like a 3/2 that cost like 2 and a shadow, and then became back to a 3/3 that cost 2 and a shadow, and is now finally once again a 3/2 for 2 and a shadow.
What was it ever a 3/2? I thought the nerf was that it was. I'm pretty sure it was a 3/3 because back in the closed beta, it was just the 2-drop that everyone played because it was the biggest one, because it was a 3/3 for 2 and a shadow.
I don't know. I thought at some point it was changed. Either way, this card has underwent a number of changes over the years, and today it is a 3/2. It is a lot worse as a 3/2 than a 3/3. The other, just to quickly go over it, the other the other Stonescar changes are that Darkblade Cut Purse, the 2/2 that used to get plus X, where X is equal to your Shadow Influence, now is a 2/1 where X is equal to your Shadow Influence. So it still gets to be really big on the front, but it's now a lot smaller on the back. The other Stonescar change is Senway Smuggler. Used to be a 3/2 for 3 merchant in Stonescar that had Shift 3, because Shift 3 on a 3-drop is not particularly useful, but most of the time they have made it more useful by giving it Decay, which I think is a great change. Before we discuss the actual balance implications, a funny story about this is, I don't know, but I'm going to tell. I'm making a guess here, but I think it's a fun guess. Anyways, so during the top 8 of match where I played Senway Smuggler, BK goes, "Wow, Stormblessed your Senway Smuggler. He can play and go to the market, and if he wants to, it can shift." And I'm pretty sure, because I was bound about for a while, I'm pretty sure he was about to be like, "It has Decay. That's so good on this board state." But he obviously couldn't say Decay because it didn't have Decay yet. So that's my funny hypothesis for the Senway Smuggler. Anyways, Sonny, how do you feel about Stonescar in light of these changes?
Yeah, I think that these changes have been in the pipeline for a while. I think they knew what they were going to change for a while, and it's just that they had to get the draft championship out of the way, finish that up before they could actually push them. So yeah, I think that it's reasonable to pull back on Stonescar. Like, Stonescar has always been the deck that you could always play, right? It's good no matter what else is going on in the metagame. And certainly the addition of Darkblade Cut Purse was pretty insane, like just a 2-drop that can hit for 7 or whatever late in the game. So I'm not sad to see that there is a change for this. Like, I think it's kind of weird that they make it a 2/1 rather than like a 1/2 or something, but it just kind of goes in line with all of the aggressive fire cards just having 1 health. They're just like really swinging. Their floor is dropped out from underneath them, although they still have the really high ceiling, along with cards like the Toad Pioneer and the Thunder of Wings, the Thunder of Wings token. So yeah, like I think that Stonescar could take these nerfs, and I'm fine with them. I think I would have done something different with Cut Purse. The change on Smuggler is interesting. The Decay is going to be relevant very often here, but it's not like the Shift was never relevant. I mean, there was the Ultra combo deck that used a bunch of Shift cards, and the Smuggler was a big part of that. And there's also the fact that there was a format where Alvin Roa was big, and if you hit their Smuggler, they could just shift it, and they didn't have to pay 6 to go to their market. So interesting how that changes, but certainly Decay, I think, is a really nice addition to the Smuggler. It's really good going into relic weapons like Backbreaker or what have you.
Yeah, I think the changes they're finding, Stonescar will survive as it always does. The interesting about Stonescar is that the thing that I think that gets that pushed over the top is that it had powerful 3-drops and it had powerful 2-drops, and now they pushed back on one of those main axes that Stonescar had. Right, Stonescar will be probably adapt and get a little bit bigger, and hopefully they'll play a little bit more power than they usually do. But I like the change to Senway Smuggler a lot. I think that it opens up diversity in Stonescar markets, because before then it was basically like, oh, you're just gonna play Winchest Merchant like every time because it's just so much better in almost all situations. Like, yes, it is somewhat disappointing that you lose access to like the Ultra combo stuff. Honestly, why not just like give it, Decay and keep it having Shift as well? That could probably have been fine. Like, I don't think that would have broke anything. But overall, I'm really glad, because I think it opens up deck building opportunities and market opportunities, and I think that's really where the most interesting parts of Eternal deck building come from is the markets, right? So giving Stonescar decks more options to build different markets, I think, is a really good move.
Yeah, the other thing is that the Stonescar deck just wasn't weak to Snowball, right? Nothing died to Snowball in it, and now you have a target for it. So, like, I think that that's also a nice aspect of it. Like, Snowball's supposed to be a good anti-aggro card, and you have the Stonescar deck that just doesn't care. So, yeah, I think that that's also another thing. Although they might just play something other than cut purse or like fewer cut purses if they feel like that is a weakness that they don't want to have. But it's so powerful. Like I can't imagine them doing that unless the metagame is really hostile towards X ones.
Speaking of things being hostile towards X1s and Snowball being good, we have a nerf after the Throne event where Kira was 50% of the top 64. We have a somewhat unexpected nerf, at least by people that I've spoken to. A lot of people expected one of the 1-cost spells to get hit, perhaps Bubble Shield goes to 2, but instead they have taken the step of changing Kira herself. Kira used to be a 3-2, now she is a 2-1. She has the same stats as Hojin, making the deck a lot more vulnerable to Blightmoths and Snowballs of the world.
I think that this is what they needed to do. Like Kira, I think what it did was fine. It just was too good in general, right? And then a stat change will do that something to mitigate that. So like I think that this is what they needed to do with Kira. I like this change. I think the Kira deck's probably still good, and honestly, that's a good thing. Like that deck is hard to play. It rewards like really well thought out lines, and I mean I don't know that this is enough. Like maybe Kira is still insane and it needs to be a 1/1 at its base or something like that, which sounds pretty ridiculous, but I like that's something I can see. But I just I think this is what needs to happen to Kira, and I think this is a good change.
Yeah, I think this is a very good change. It means that the Kira it just can't attack as well in the early game, and you need to have more support, right? So like the Kira decks and Expedition are going to be a lot harder because Kira is just less good of a base unit. Because the Kira decks and Expedition were sort of like half Kira, half not Kira, and this sort of pulls back on that a little bit. Another very important thing that this does is that a 4/3 in its second mode is a lot different than a 5/4. Like it attacks for a lot less and is vulnerable to a lot more. Torch and Seer were just really bad because not only was it stopped by like Bubble Shield and Intrusion, but it was also just stopped by Kira, having 6 Justice, which is not uncommon to have either, mid game or late game. So, pulling back on it, allowing Kira to be more interactable, but still having, a good ceiling, I think is a good change. Possibly Bubble Shield might still go to 2 in the future, but at least for now, I think this is a very good change. I wasn't expecting it, but looking at it, I think the change will be good.
Yeah, I mean, this is. Chapin actually messaged me about the state of the game. This is something that I mentioned. I was like, I think Kira's fine. It just needs to be pulled back on the stats. So I hope I'm right, basically. And what you mentioned about Torch and 3 health is absolutely a big deal. So the next card that has been changed is Backbreaker. Is now going to be a 6-cost card. It still requires Double Shadow, and no changes to the actual text of the card. But I also think this is good because it was just a little too, gosh, I can't think of a different word, but backbreaking in the early game. Like, as the Argenport decks developed in Expedition, it was just too hard to come back from a backbreaker on curve, especially when supplemented with, like, a Roland the turn before or something like that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think this is, traditionally when you take a card and you increase its cost by 1, it kills the card. Except for things like Zoe, which weren't real cards anyways. But I have seen mutterings about this as a buff because now he played an even decks, but I'm like, I just think that's a ridiculous statement. But I could be wrong. Even decks always are surprising in that capacity at how good they end up being. But I think that this is going to be probably more akin to being a good market card now than a good main deck card because you don't want to overload on 6s. Like if you're building some sort of broker 3 faction deck, Time, Justice, Shadow, this is probably reasonable inclusion in a broker market for that style archetype. I'm not sure about the card anymore. I think 6 is a lot more than 5. It's a lot slower. And now the interesting not upside, but the interesting gameplay mechanic for this is that it will mean that Backbreaker will always be a bigger weapon, right? Because at 6 you're gonna have more Justice Age at 5, right? So. But overall, I think you're going to see a lot less backbreakers now. I think maybe you'll still see some, but like 6 is a lot more than 5.
Yeah, and the other thing is that with relic weapons, you really have to get out ahead of your opponent, right? Like the earlier you can get your relic weapon down, it just makes so much of a huger deal. Like the difference between playing a relic weapon with your opponent having one unit more than you and playing a relic weapon when your opponent has the same number of units as you, that's a huge deal. So like having an extra turn before you can play Backbreaker with Defiance backup, it's just really big. But I still think it's a good card. Like I think this was sneakily on like Helio levels of power level, even though it might not have looked like it, just like from the first look at the card. But Backbreaker was really good, and it was dominating a lot of games that came down early. I think it's still going to see some play. I think it can still be a 4 of in certain decks, but I think that it's going to be more viable to come back from. All right, so the next change is a reversion of some nerfs, and that's really exciting for me. We're getting some of these cards from Praxis Pledge unnerfed. So Daria Warrior Poet is back down to being a 4-cost 3/4, and Moonstone Vanguard now is a 5/5 that gains 5 health when you block. And boy, Praxis Pledge was one of my favorite decks. I loved playing that deck. That's like my style of getting aggressive, attacking from multiple angles, having lots of cards to back it off. And I think if you've played ladder recently since the patch, you've probably seen a lot of Praxis Pledge. I think a lot of people like that deck also. Now, is it going to be as oppressive as it was before it got nerfed? That's a good question. I mean, Eternal is a lot more powerful than it used to be, so there's a lot more competition for those cards now, for that strategy now. But I imagine that Praxis Pledge is back to being a player.
I know that Sunny, I know of other people also, but I know Sunny is super excited to be able to enjoy Praxis Pledge again. My thought is that I discovered that I had 2 Darias that I could disenchant, so that was cool. I got some shift stone back there. I love Moonstone Vanguard. I was sad that they had to hurt my baby in their attempt to nerf Praxis Pledge. They hurt my Xenon mid range, was very disappointing to me. So I'm excited to play with Moonstone Vanguard again. Interesting thing about Praxis Pledge does get some improvements of its own after all this, right? Like you can play All Head in Praxis Pledge now. You can play maybe Milos in Praxis Pledge. Jack possibly in Praxis Pledge. So there are. It's not. Yes, the 16 pledge cards are going to be the same as they were before. With 20 with Glasshopper, but there are other cards, and the decks can evolve and also improve based on the surrounding environment. So I'm excited to see Praxis Pledge again. Finally, Sunny is vindicated, and Heart of the Vault is no longer the card you should play in Praxis Pledge.
Geez, I got so much crap about that back in the day. I mean, the last tournament that I played Praxis Pledge in, I guess it wasn't the dominating deck on the block. This was for the last chance qualifier last year, for last year's season's Worlds. I wasn't playing any Heart of the Vaults. Heart of the Vault still cost 6. I did not want it. And that had more to do with the metagame than anything. Like, Heart of the Vault was still a very powerful card. I just expected to see a whole lot of harsh rules where it's not quite as good as something like, I don't know, Flame Blast or Eclipse Dragon. But boy, in this day and age, if you're playing an aggro deck, I don't think you can rationalize playing a Heart of the Vault.
Well, Heart of the Vault now costs 7. It now costs 7.
But even if it did cost 6, I feel like it probably wouldn't make the cut these days. But yeah, I don't know if L-Head's a thing to do, because I don't think you're going that deep on influence. Jack has some problems too. I don't know how many sigils you're playing, probably just 9, right? You got the 16 dual faction power and then 9 sigils. That's probably what you're going for. Probably as far as market access goes, you're probably playing the Smuggler, although etchings are an interesting inclusion and maybe worth considering. I think that I would expect Praxis Pledge to be a player, and it's interesting with these new tools, what is going to work out, what's going to work out the best. People have mentioned playing Ubzot and going heavy on the time influence, but is that the right thing to do? I really don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the deck building shakes up. both what the best deck will be and also what the standard list will be, right? I expect the standard list will probably play Jex and Miloses or whatever, because if there's one thing you can know about Eternal players, is that they're super greedy. They're just built the greediest decks. Like, I'm just gonna play like no power in my deck and get there every time,
Well, I mean, Jack makes a lot of sense for the deck. It's a deck that otherwise can't deal with 4 health blockers. And the deck was trying to play 3 Fire Influence for Heart of the Vault anyway, right? Like, you do have 16 duels.
Yeah.
But I think the harder part is going to make sure that you have the sigils to support it. And I really don't know. I can see it going either way.
We also have Plunder now, which can go with the Jet potentially. Also, the fact that you are pledging means you are more likely to have a sigil in hand, right? Because you're playing your unit as a power, so the power in your hand can be saved for later. So there is some kind of synergy between Jack and Pledge, where it's like, you're pledging so that it lets you use the power later. Either way, I think it'll be very interesting to see how, it's been a long time, so like it's not like the deck was able to evolve and iterate through all these sets, and it's all of a sudden it comes back, and now all of a sudden there's just a bunch of number deck building questions, and I think that's interesting. Now, I'm probably not going to answer those deck building questions because I never really played much Praxis Pledge to begin with, and I'm probably not going to play much now, but I'm excited to see what happens though in the community.
Yeah, one more thing I should mention. The deck did get other nerfs. Like, the deck is not in its complete former glory. Like, Teacher of Humility is a 3-2 now instead of a 3-3. And the...
Amaran Stinger.
Yeah, Amaram Stinger from the same place that you get. The naming is from the same place as Stormblessed, is what I hear. Nobody's going to get that, and I'm going to just look really awkward. It's a 2-3, right? It used to be a 2-4, and that was a huge deal. Torch is no longer a fast spell. Like, all these cards that were part of the Praxis Pledge deck, turned out the whole deck needed to be nerfed. I wonder if you go back to the old Praxis Pledge list and see how many of those cards actually did not get nerfed, because I don't think it's too many. Tokus also got nerfed. It's now a 2-4 instead of a 3-4.
Sakalis remained untouched through the years.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. Sakalis is a pretty insane card. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? We got a few buffs to a couple time units. Copper Conduit now is back to its original cost of being 1+ instead of 2+. So if you pay 6 power for a Copper Conduit, it's a 6/6 instead of being a 5/5.
I think the Copper Conduit buff, going back to Journal State, is actually really interesting because the card was super cool before. It's interesting now because, it is just a pile of stats, but there are some very cool interactions, especially if you recur Copper Conduit, which is the main reason to play, right? If you play Dark Return, you play it again, it keeps the stats from before. Another interesting move is to play, if you play as like a 4/4, and then it dies, next turn you can play Shadowlands Guide, recur it, and you get another +2/+2, right? So, or if you just play it by itself, it recurs a 1-drop that has, 4/4 in stats, right? Kind of like a Nahid's Faithful. So there are a number of really cool tricks, or even like Aramant's Machinations can bring it back because it is a 1-drop. So I'm trying this card out, right? So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things here now that it costs 1 again. At 2, it was just really expensive. It's also Expedition legal with Shadowlands Guide, right? So you might not have expected that because it was just 2 costs and it was unplayable in Expedition. But now it costs 1, so it's very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. That's actually really interesting. I'm excited to see if anyone can come up with something cool to do with it. All those... Well, I mean, the reason why it was nerfed is because you would be able to, like, a common line of play would be to give it Killer and then, like, Dark Return and then play it, which costs 2, and then have a very large unit that has Killer and be able to hit something like that. But also, like, time units are really good now. It's hard to rationalize the first playing of Copper Conduit, right? Because so many of the time units are just so powerful and have so many great abilities.
A 4-cost 4/4 is not what it used to be. Speaking of cards that aren't what they used to be, and time units that just do a bunch of stuff, and also 4-drops. Woda, Grodaw's listener, commonly referred to as, the other listener. That listener doesn't really exist, the worst listener. Why are there only 4 listeners in the cycle, Daryl? Why didn't you print the time listener? Woda used to be a 2/3 for 4 time, which invoked that you pay 8, and it got +3/+3, and that was just expensive and understated and just bad. Now it is a 4-cost 2/4 where you pay 6 and it gets +3/+3. And another note is that if you deal 5 damage with it with Mastery 5, it gets, I believe, +3/+3 and invokes again, right? So it's not just a weird overstated pump for return. It's also, you get a permanent pump if it survives, right? So I think I actually really like this change. I thought WOTA was criminally not great, and I like it a lot more now. It's not expedition legal, so I wonder if it has the cojones to get through into Throne, but I like it a lot more now.
I guess this card still seems pretty bad for me. Like again, it's a time card that just doesn't give you very much on the first play. Like I guess you get to invoke, but boy, you could have a 2/4 for your 4 power, or you can silence your opponent's hands and have a 6/4, or you can have Sandstorm Tiger, something like that. Like it just seems so underwhelming. And I think the time invoke is the weakest of them all because time is like just the most inflexible faction there
Oh
is.
yeah, oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that time had such bad invokes. Either way, I wanted to see play because Woda never really got to see play before. So I'm like, please Woda, get there. But yeah, I'm kind of with Sunny. I don't think it's gonna get there, but it is a lot more resilient at 4 health than it was at 3 health. Like Diana shows that a 2/4 for 4 that draws a card is not the worst thing. Although Diana also is flying and gains you 4 life, 2 life, 2 armor, which the armor can be relevant, and also can like become like a 2020 late game where this doesn't be a 2020 late game, but it does get bigger, so it's kind of comparable. Either way, I like that they buffed it because if they buff a card and the card doesn't break through the meta, then it deserves to be buffed.
Yeah. All right. Here's one that a lot of people are going to be happy about. Snowcrest Yeti, now back to being a 2/1 Aegis. It was a 1/1 Aegis before, and well, I think we're just going to see a lot of Skycrag. Skycrag was already pretty good, like as an aggro deck in Expedition, right? And is Snowcrest Yeti in Expedition? I feel like it's not.
I don't think it is. Let me double check. Let me just check out Eternal Warcry Snow Crust Yeti. Furious typing during the middle of a podcast. Uh, Draft packs Argent Depths version 2 apply filter. No, it is not legal. Yeah, so it's a throne only
Okay,
card,
so
but it still impact throne because turns out 2/1s for 1 are very good at attacking, as Sunny has demonstrated time and time again. And 2/1s for 1 that can attack while also not dying are also really good.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't die to Blinkmoth or Snowball or what have you, and that's a big deal. This is the best 1-drop in Yetis, and that's going to put Yetis back on the map. I think, like in aggro deck, somehow Stonescar has gotten away with not having a 1-drop forever, but like a 1-drop that is viable, especially something that can get bigger and has synergies with your other cards, just does so much for an aggro deck. It lets you play on turn 1 where most people are taking the turn off.
Yeah, this is a big deal. Expect to see lots of Yetis because also just like with Praxis Pledge, people really like playing the Yetis deck. So it's back.
Yep. Next change is another reversion of a nerf. Vanquish now costs 2, and instead of costing 3. I don't really understand why they nerfed it in the first place. Like, I guess it was a good card, but like once they nerfed it, there was no reason to ever play Vanquish instead of Pristine Light. Like that was a classic case of you versus the whoever she tells you not to worry about. So I mean, I guess we might see some Vanquish, but like in this day and age of removal being good, I'm not sure that we will. I don't know. It's hard to say. It really depends on the meta, right? And I feel like in Throne, you're just not likely to see this.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, there are some interesting implications, right? It can now go back into salvo markets. What was it ever able to go in salvo markets, or was it nerfed before salvo came out? Uh,
I don't feel like I've ever seen a Vanquish in a Salvo market, so I'm gonna go with it was nerfed before Salvo came out.
Yeah, so now we got this. Now I got this new option to put a Vanquish into a salvo market, which is nice because one of the big issues with salvo markets, as you might encounter sometimes, is that you might have a hard time having a card that deals with a big card in a 2-cost market, right? If you're playing like a Rakano deck, then your options for dealing with big threats are like you're gonna salvo and sear the same target, and that's just a feels bad moment all around. So I'm glad it costs 2 again. I'm interested to see how it can impact the meta. I don't know. Is it good anymore? I don't know. We have like Annihilate. We still Annihilate. Annihilate just only gets better as time goes on, it looks like. So Defile exists. But I guess Defile is
Well,
like the
yeah,
opposite of Vanquish. But
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as Annihilate goes, they also just released a ton of cards that care about being extremely invested in one faction and are, mono faction units themselves. So, like, I think that's why Annihilate has been so good lately. Um, I might have undersold Vanquish. Like, I've been thinking about it as you were talking. I was like, maybe Vanquish actually is the real deal because it does kill a large thing for only two, and that's something that um, you know, you can't get a lot of the time. Like a lot of the unconditional kill spells cost three instead of two, and Vanquish is far from unconditional, but it deals with some things that you know, like it deals with Prism Golem or whatever. People aren't playing Prism Golem in Throne, but like you get what I'm saying, right? Like it deals with Ubzod or something, and
It
it
deals with
costs
Champion
two.
of Chaos.
Yeah, deals with Champion of Chaos only costs two. Deals with, I mean, I guess most of Stonecar cards get to be, um, have four attack or greater. I guess they're also mostly monofaction, but it's a unique card. And, I think that when the time calls for it, that then we'll see play. It certainly seems better than like just desserts, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Just there's an odd card. I've come to the conclusion that I don't like the card very much because as a two cost Defiance, it costs two for Defiance. So uh, like my two, I don't want to play two for my reactive card. Paying one for my reactive card is fine, right? But if I'm paying two, I want to be able to you know choose when it's going to be good, right? And Justice Earth has just been extremely underwhelming over these past few months, and so Vanquish is interesting. Now the question is Vanquish main deck or market, right? If you're looking at Vanquish in the market, you still have Pristine Light to choose from. So I don't know. Now Salvo obviously makes it easy if you're playing a Salvo market, but
Well, I mean, it probably depends on what merchant you're playing. Well, I don't know. If you're playing the three cost merchants, it might make a lot of sense to have Vanquish instead of Pristine Light, so you can do it on turn five instead of turn six, or
yeah, that's a big
take
deal.
two turns. But like etchings, it's probably fine to just keep on playing Pristine Light. I don't know. Like, do we have a metagame right now? Like, does the metagame matter? There's no tournaments for almost a month
Well,
for basically
we
3 weeks.
we have a tournament. Yeah, 3 weeks, 3 weeks away. So next week, I kind of expect metas to start solidifying, and then 2 weeks from now, there definitely be a meta. Uh, and I expect currently the current meta is going to be lots of Praxis Pledge and lots of Yetis, and I still expect there to be Stonescar.
Yeah, bring all
So
your anti-aggro. And we were having this discussion. This is an aside, but like we were having the discussion of Blightmoth, and you and I think that Blightmoth is, it's a fine card at doing what it does, but it's not necessarily like a slam dunk included in Shadow Index. There is a big cost to playing Blightmoths, and that is your card is just not very proactive at all. And against the cards that we've been talking about so far, I think it does seem like a pretty good card. It hits Gunrunner. It it hits all these, or it hits a lot of these fire aggressive units.
it hits Gunrunner.
Isn't Gunrunner a 3/1?
It's a 4/2. Its weapon is a 3/1.
Yeah, you can see how well I remember that. All I remember is that the weapon had three, two, three, it was a 3 and a quick draw. Boy, I hope the editor edits that out. That was embarrassing. I
Editor,
played so
keep it
much of
in.
that.
No, just kidding.
It's
Editor, you
been
can
a
edit
long
that out.
time. It's been a long time. I've played so many decks since then. Anyway, yeah, whatever. Okay, two of them hit a gun runner. Yeah, let's go with that.
Two of them hit a Gunrunner. But yeah, so I mean, the thing about Blightmoth also is that Blightmoth is very small. It's a 1/2 flyer. Like it does a lot of small things, right? So like you can leverage the tempo gives you, especially it's like an aggro deck. But you really have to have other things with. Blightmoth by itself will not defeat an aggro deck. I've both won and lost with and against multiple Blightmoths as the aggro deck, just because sometimes it does get there, especially if you're not playing like a sacrifice deck where the Blightmoth comes into really shining around. Blightmoth's an odd duck. I'm kind of coming around to maybe people are like thinking it's unfun, and fun and feelings are exceptionally valid ways to balance a card game because they matter in many ways more so than actual balance, the way people feel about a game. But overall, I think the card is just fine.
Yeah.
It's roughly how I feel about Turn to See, right? Like it's sometimes very annoying. It's very polarizing. A lot of people think it's very unfun, and it just probably is okay balance-wise, but maybe people think it's unfun to the point where it should get nerfed. I don't know. I don't care. Nerfing cards is not my job. I don't envy Direwolf.
Well, yeah, I think the thing about Turn to Seed is that it punishes you for really hinging on one card, right? And those a lot of the time are decks that are a lot of fun, like really synergistic decks that you really need this one unit to stick. And then once they're all out of your deck, it feels really bad.
The same thing can be said about Blightmoth, though, right? Because if you're playing Blightmoth, you're being punished for building this really synergistic deck around your favorite tribe, whatever. So you're being punished for playing your fun deck, right? The other thing is, like the other part that's kind of perhaps anti-fun about Blightmoth is like, take Stonescar, right? You're not playing a tribal deck with Stonescar, but all your units happen to be gunslingers anyways.
Yeah, but like I feel like saying that Blightmoth is an end to aggro is extreme. Like there are ways of playing around Blightmoth, and there are ways of building your deck to make sure that you don't die to Blightmoth. I mean, when I won my Throne Championship, I played against 3 or 4 Blightmoth decks, right? They had a lot of Blightmoths.
Yeah.
Wasn't good enough. Okay, back to our original topic, the rest of this patch. So Crown of Authority is, I think it's a 7-cost relic. It has Inspire, well now it has Inspire, units you draw get +4/+4 instead of +2/+2.
It also has another text on it. Do you remember what its other text is? Because I remember. I know the bad cards in the game.
It's like pay 7 to draw a unit of your choice from your deck or something.
Nope, it is pay 7 to draw a unit of your choice that costs 7 or more.
Alright, great. So you can get... Your unit was already going to be gigantic.
If you invest 21 power into this, you can play a 7-drop that gets +4/+4.
Awesome. Okay, great. I don't think this card is very exciting. It wasn't exciting before. Well, I mean, maybe it's exciting, but I don't think it was good, and I still don't think it's good. Well, geez, +4/+4 is a big buff. But Anthem of Grodov or whatever it is, like units in your hand get +4/+4 in Endurance, was never a real card, right? So I mean, maybe we've just been sleeping on it, but
it's like Xenon Obelisk, but it's like Xenon Obelisk, but you actually have to pay the twice as much, and it's units you draw, not units in play, so you have to actually wait to draw them. I think it's very fun, or I assume it's very fun for people that like having fun. Who's ridiculous like that? I prefer winning. But but yeah, so I think the card's fun. I'm glad they're buffing cards that are fun for people, but no, I don't expect it to be tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 even. Anyways, moving on. Cards that I think were marginal before and are still slightly better, but probably still marginal. Good market option is Innate Conviction. It used to be it's a 4-cost spell that has Warp and has deal 3 damage. Onslaught used to have Onslaught. Create and draw a 3/4 Arc Dragon with your spells deal +1 damage. Nowadays is going to create and draw a 3/5 Arc Dragon with your spells deal 2 damage. So that's a pretty significant buff to its backside.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty big buff, but like it's so conditional. You have to get the Onslaught in order to play this, and then you have to get the Dragon to stick. So I don't think that this is going to amount to a whole ton, especially since like the most we've seen Innate Conviction as a one-of in decks that are playing Garden of Omens that have Resurface, and those decks really don't activate Onslaught often. Like it's just to make sure that you have something that you can resurface for and play immediately on that turn. But even so, just like, paying 4 for your torch instead of 1 for your torch. And the reason why it can do this is because it has Warp, of course. I don't know if we mentioned that yet. So like paying 4 for your torch is just so miserable. It's so behind rate. This might just fall into the category of cards that are fun, and the people that enjoy playing them will really enjoy playing it.
I wish I would. Well, obviously, I wish it costs 3, Sunny. I wish all the fun cards cost less, obviously. But the other interesting move I think that they could have done is if they had changed Onslaught to Spark.
Ooh.
Now Spark is one of the worst mechanics or whatever. But like then if they had Spark as a 4-cost card, you can get out of a transpose market, and then suddenly, one of the downsides to transpose is that you're losing out on card advantage. But this card gives you back a card, right? So like. It'd be very expensive, but you would get a powerful unit that, really beefs up your spells, right? Like turning Snowball into Torch and turning Torch into Super Torch, right? That's really good.
Yeah.
So
turning your Transpose into deal 4, yeah.
Plus damage is a lot. So like I wouldn't be surprised if this does that, because don't underestimate +2. Like torches and snowballs the torch and torches into super torches. Like that's a lot. That's big game.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still probably marginal. Anyway, so they also gave if you like elves, they gave your elf friend a buff. Livia Hexweaver has finally been fixed after all this time. It used to say units with endurance can't block, and now it's enemies with endurance can't block. And the reason that is relevant is because they gave us a relic that gives all your elves endurance. So you played Livia in your elves deck, and then suddenly they all turned into rats. You could no longer block.
Yeah, this one was a long time coming. I'm glad that they made this change. I still think that elves is not quite strong enough, but Livia's a really good card. I guess it was Blightmoth before Blightmoth. So maybe considering that Blightmoth is just cheaper and you don't need to have the onslaught, Blightmoth is probably still better, but I'm glad they made this change again. It seems like we're just into the category of fun cards that they changed here in the bottom half of the balance change.
Well, the Livia's thing, it's a very Blightmoth style effect, but it is also a little different because it's units with the same name. So it's a lot more restrictive, right? You can't hit both sides of Grenadindron. You can only hit one side of Grenadindron. But yeah, Livia. I always liked Livia. I thought it was cool. Does it have lifesteal?
Yes, it does.
Crazier does it have lifesteal?
Yes, it has lifesteal.
Yeah, Livia was a cool card. It's one of those cards that's very classic Eternal with just like a lot of text, but it's got it's got no not relevant text, if that makes sense. It turns out I was playing a game of Eternal recently. It turns out Braum has the text that your cards can't be stolen. Did you guys know that? I found that out. No one knew that happened because it's got a bunch of other text on it. It's got does maximum power, makes 8 giants. So obviously I'm just gonna forget random hate texts on this card.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. The last change that we have is Relentless Gorehorn, which was a 4-cost 3/3 Minotaur with Revenge. Now has all your Minotaurs get +2 strength, including itself, because previously it did not give itself strength. So that's kind of interesting, but I think that this card is still pretty behind rate. I mean, a 5/3 Revenge without any game-breaking abilities, even at 4, is kind of questionable. And the Minotaurs has not ever gotten there as a tribe. I don't think that that's a tribe that has ever paid off as well as I think some people had hoped.
Yeah, again, this is one of those changes that's, again, like Sunny said, long time coming, right? Just like Livia, you always look at the card and you always expected it to give itself +2 strength, and it never did, and it always made you sad because, as is, it was just a really, really bad. What was that other card? The
Pressgang?
Yeah, it was obviously Pressgang now costs 5, so but Backbreaker costs 3. It's this is just crappy Pressgang. This is just garbage Pressgang. Now it finally, it's a 5/3 on the first half, a 7/3 on the second half. Obviously, you don't want to play it in not a Minotaur deck, but Minotaurs are not really a thing right now, but they could be a thing someday. Maybe instead of Totemite, we get Minotaur mites. If we get Minotaur mites, this card will get good. We get Minotaur line, assembly line, but they make Minotaurs. Ooh, baby, this card suddenly becomes awesome.
Well, I really like that there haven't been tribal, a big emphasis on tribal decks in Eternal. There's Yetis, and it's always been, good but not dominating. It hasn't been, Yetis versus Minotaurs, or it hasn't been super heavy on tribes. I like that aspect of Eternal. I feel like when it comes to competitive play, having a big emphasis on tribes isn't particularly fun for deck building, and a lot of the time it ends up having really snowbally games. So I like that aspect of Eternal, but for the people that enjoy doing it and having a tier 2 or tier 3 deck that plays a tribe, yeah, good, great, awesome. This should be more fun for them.
If you like tier 2 tribal decks, try Even Paladins. That deck never goes away.
I haven't seen that deck in a long time, and you've mentioned it twice in a row, so I feel like it's going to be the November surprise for the Worlds or whatever.
I constantly face it on ladder. I'm just ladder, and it's oh, Even Paladins again. Oh, Even Paladins again. It's just always there. Every time I ladder for a couple hours or whatever on Throne, or even an hour. Not an hour. If I play for 2 hours, I'm likely to face one Even Paladins, I feel like. But anyways, speaking of tribal decks, there was a one tribal set in Eternal's history. I think it was called the Dusk Road, and it is commonly thought of as the worst set for a variety of reasons, but it's possible tribal is one of them because the way that Eternal works mechanically, it's based on what Darrell has done. Maybe they'll crack this nugget in the future, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do. But it looks like fun, interactive, interesting tribal effects are hard to pull off mechanically by Eternal. We'll see if that changes in the future, if they manage to create some good stuff in the future. As is, I kind of agree with Sunny. Like there's only so many ways to build Yetis, right? Where it's like if you're looking at like the sacrifice deck, right? Like there are so many ways to build the sacrifice deck, like Fire Time Shadow Sacrifice back in the days of Expedition with like Worthy Cause. There was like 5 ways to build it. And of those 5 ways, there were still multitudes of variants between each of those 5, right? And they were all, they all had similar stuff going on, but they were all pretty different too. So tribal is harder though, because like Yetis is Yetis, right? Like there's only so many ways that you're gonna put like Wump in, you're gonna put like Wump's Masterwork in, you're gonna put this, Snowcrest Yeti, you're gonna put Torch in, right? There's Champion of Fury, right? It kind of builds itself, as Sunny said. So it's good that there are some of those, right? And even if Yetis is tier 1, which I wouldn't be surprised based because it's Yetis. But I'm glad that the majority of the game is not tribal.
Yes, absolutely. And that rounds up this patch. I'm excited to see what the metagame looks like. Hopefully it's a little more healthy, although I think both of the formats were in a pretty good spot, aside from Kira. And, Kira got nerfed, and hopefully that's enough to bring it to the level of the rest of the decks, and hopefully we don't get overrun by Praxis Pledge.
Yeah, I would just like to finish the cast as well by saying that Sunny is super sus, and you shouldn't trust him.
Oh, God.
Eject Sunny. He's sus.
That's the worst meme. Like, memes are generally pretty bad, but the whole sus meme is really taking it to another level. Okay. So for all you listeners out there, next week we are doing a mailbag episode. So if you would like to have a question for me or Stormblessed, just ask it in the FECast section of the Friends of Eternal Discord, or message one of us, and we'll be sure to answer it next time. Hopefully we'll have enough to fill out an entire episode, right?
If you want to keep it anonymous, you can message either me or Sunny directly just to clarify further, if you don't want it to be public for whatever reason. So ask us questions, ask us about archetypes, cards, I don't know, personal life issues, dating advice.
Oh yeah, dating advice on an Eternal podcast. I'm sure that would go over great.
Probably not the last one, but you guys get the idea, I assume.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, next week is the week that we're going to try to answer as many of them as possible. Until then, huge shout out to our editor SRFS, who just puts in a ton of work making sure that FECast is edited in a timely manner. And a huge shout out to all of our Patreon sponsors. These fine folks help pay for FECast costs and, keep the show alive. So huge shout out to Cotillion, writer Alcy Bava, Work Done Son, Chamomile Crissier, D-Dub, and Yeast Out. If you would like to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. I think that's it. Join the Discord if you're not a part of it. Until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the Friend Zone.
The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels, all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the Friend Zone.
I don't think we made a big enough deal about the fact that we're both qualified for Worlds, but we can do that in the promotion of this or something, or just general promotion.
Yeah, I mean,
just,
we can mention it every episode. As always, it is Stormblessed and Sunny. Did you guys know they're both qualified for Worlds? Stormblessed and Sunny here. Did you know that we're both qualified for Worlds? Hey, guess what, people? In case you weren't aware, we're both qualified for Worlds. Oh man, I'm sure you haven't heard by now. I mean, it's only the 20th time we've talked about it, but did you know both qualified for Worlds? I know Worlds just happened, but we were both qualified for Worlds.
Oh, please put that in SRFS. Okay.